Okay, let's just dive right into this. When most people think about cannabis, their minds immediately jump straight to THC, right? And, well, maybe CBD. And honestly, for a really long time, that is exactly where the conversation ended. But welcome to today's explainer, because we are going to completely flip that paradigm on its head. What if I told you that scientists have literally identified more than 100 different cannabinoids inside this single plant? No way, right? But it's true. We are moving far beyond this old-school THC-only mindset. We really need to start looking at cannabis as this highly complex biochemical factory. It's absolutely packed with compounds that have totally different structures, different origins, and wildly different biological functions.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at what's beyond just THC. Then we'll meet the mother cannabinoid, followed by the major cannabinoids. After that, we'll dive into the entourage effect. And finally, we'll wrap things up with cultivation and chemistry.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Beyond Just THC. Now, to really grasp how these compounds work, we've got to break down a pretty common assumption. But before we drown in an absolute alphabet soup of chemical acronyms, because trust me, there are a lot, let's just ask the most fundamental question here. What exactly is a cannabinoid? Seriously, it's a word that gets thrown around constantly these days, but getting this foundation locked in is absolutely crucial for everything else we're going to talk about today. Simply put, a cannabinoid is just a naturally occurring chemical compound produced primarily by cannabis plants. But here's the thing, they don't just magically appear everywhere on the plant. They're actually synthesized right inside the glandular trichomes. If you've ever looked closely at a cannabis bud, you know those tiny, frosty resin-producing structures covering the flowers and the little leaves nearby? Yeah, those. That is literally where all the microscopic magic happens.
Okay, so remember that assumption I said we needed to break? Well, here it is. Cannabis did not evolve cannabinoids for us to use, period. The plant was pumping out these compounds millions of years before humans ever even discovered their effects. It's actually an incredible multi-pronged survival mechanism for the plant itself. Think of it like a giant botanical Swiss Army knife. Scientists actually believe these cannabinoids act like a built-in sunscreen, protecting the plant against harsh ultraviolet radiation. Plus, they play a huge role in fighting off pesky insects and pathogens, reducing environmental stress, and fiercely protecting the plant's delicate reproductive tissues. So yeah, it's all about plant survival.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, the mother cannabinoid. To really get where all these compounds come from, we have to realize that THC is actually just the end result of a much larger biochemical pathway. At the absolute dead center of this whole process is a compound called CBGA, or cannabigerolic acid. You'll often hear CBGA called the mother cannabinoid. You can kind of think of CBGA as the sturdy trunk of a giant family tree, because without this trunk, there are no branches. There's no THCA, no CBDA, no CBCA. The whole shebang starts right here. Nearly every major cannabinoid begins its life as CBGA, right before specialized enzymes step in and basically sculpt those different branches.
Now, there is a crucial distinction here that you absolutely must know. Believe it or not, raw, fresh cannabis actually contains very little active THC. Instead, it's packed with THCA. That A stands for the acidic form, meaning it has this extra carboxyl group attached to it. THCA and THC, they are simply not the same molecule. To actually get to the active THC, you've got to apply heat to knock off that extra carboxyl group. This whole process is called decarboxylation. It's a big word, but it's exactly why smoking, vaping, or baking is required to actually activate the cannabinoids. The heat literally changes the fundamental chemistry.
Moving right along to Section 3, the major cannabinoids. Let's meet the family.
All right, let's zoom in a bit and meet the main characters of this botanical family. First up, obviously, we have THC, the most famous of the bunch. It's the one responsible for the intoxicating effects because it binds directly to the CB1 receptors in our central nervous system, which is how it influences things like mood and memory. Next up is CBD. Now, CBD is completely non-intoxicating. It doesn't bind strongly to those CB1 receptors. Instead, it uses these really complex signaling pathways and actually sort of balances out how THC interacts with our bodies. Pretty cool, right? Then we've got CBG. Remember our mother cannabinoid, CBGA? Well, CBG is basically the remnant. It's what's left over when CBGA doesn't get converted into those other branches. And finally, there's CBC. This one is highly abundant and a major natural player in the plant, yet, surprisingly enough, it remains vastly understudied compared to the rest of the crew.
Now, CBN is super interesting because it occupies a totally unique position here. CBN, or cannabinol, isn't actually produced in large quantities by the living plant itself. Instead, it forms through an aging and degradation process. So, as fresh THC ages and oxidizes over time, we're talking months or even years, it naturally converts into CBN. So, if you ever spot elevated CBN levels in a product, it's usually a dead giveaway of how old it is and how it's been stored. It's basically the plant showing its age. But wait, there's more. Beyond those major players, we've got THCV and a whole bunch of minor branches. THCV is a fascinating one. It's actually found in much higher concentrations within certain African cannabis populations. And structurally, it looks a whole lot like THC. But here's the wild part. Even incredibly small structural differences can create dramatically different biological behaviors in the human body. It is truly awe-inspiring. And scientists are really just now scratching the surface on all these other minor branches too, like CBDV, CBCV, CBL, and CBT. It's like a whole hidden universe in there.
Okay, let's zoom back out for Section 4, the entourage effect.
You see, out in the real world, cannabinoids rarely just hang out in isolation. A single cannabis flower might contain dozens of different cannabinoids all at once, existing right alongside terpenes, flavonoids, volatile sulfur compounds, and esters. This incredibly complex mixture creates what scientists call the entourage effect. The basic idea here is that dozens of these compounds interact simultaneously to influence how your body actually feels and reacts. This is absolutely crucial to understand. It means the specific effects you're feeling aren't just from one isolated, lonely molecule. Nope, it's from an entire botanical orchestra, all playing together at the exact same time.
And, this is exactly why the industry's historical obsession with breeding solely for the highest possible THC percentages is just fundamentally flawed. Just consider this quote for a second. Two cultivars with identical THC levels may produce dramatically different experiences due to differences in minor cannabinoids, terpenes, and other compounds. I mean, that hits the nail on the head. Higher THC does not automatically equal better cannabis or a better experience for that matter. The whole chemical profile, the whole ensemble is what truly matters when you're looking at a product.
Which leads us right into our final part, Section 5, Cultivation and Chemistry.
So how do we actually get the most out of these plants? Well, it takes a deliberate, multi-step process to maximize a plant's chemical expression. Step 1 is genetics. The genetics essentially lay the foundation. They establish the baseline potential for what that cannabinoid profile could actually be. But let's be real, great genetics alone just aren't enough. Step 2 is the environment. We're talking about dialing in the light intensity, the temperature, water availability, and the nutrition. And finally, Step 3 brings in cultivation practices. Things like perfectly timing the harvest and making sure the root system is super healthy. A truly skilled grower knows exactly how to pull the levers on these environmental steps to unlock and maximize all those desirable traits hidden deep inside the genetics.
Think about this. 20 years ago, the entire industry was completely fixated on just one number, the THC percentage. But today, take a look at that number, 100 plus. Laboratories out there are now routinely measuring dozens and dozens of cannabinoids. This represents a massive, game-changing shift in analytical testing. As our technology gets better and better, we are uncovering an awe-inspiring array of previously completely overlooked compounds. And that new data? It's completely transforming breeding programs, changing cultivation strategies, and ultimately dictating what consumers are going to eventually find on the shelves.
So if you take away just one single thing from this entire explainer today, please let it be this. Cannabis is far, far more than just a vehicle for THC. It is, without a doubt, one of the most chemically sophisticated plants ever studied by modern science. Every single microscopic trichome on that plant is literally an intricate biochemical factory, actively pumping out a deeply complex mixture of compounds around the clock.
Which leaves us with this final, rather provocative thought to chew on. As our testing technology continues to rapidly advance, and as we uncover even more of these hidden compounds, what unprecedented discoveries is evidence-based plant science going to reveal next inside this intricate biochemical factory? I mean, the deeper we look, the more complex the picture becomes. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, keep letting your curiosity lead the way.